Welcome to another United States history lecture. This time it's entitled The Gilded Age. So we'll talk about what does that mean and who does that involve. The target for this lecture is 5.02. So let's get the big question out of the way. What the heck is the Gilded Age? So the famous writer Mark Twain and a collaborator of his wrote a book in the 19th century, and that book labeled the time period from 1877 to 1900 as the Gilded Age. To be gilded means to be colored in gold, to look like it's got gold on it. But underneath, there may not actually be any gold at all. The gold may only be surface and appear to be gold. What Twain and his co-writer were trying to do was to suggest that the people from 1877 and 1900 were just out to get rich. They were chasing gold, chasing after wealth. But he also wanted to show and point out that these folks were really attracted to appearances and not substance. While they're pursuing gold and pursuing wealth, these are people who are on the inside fake. They don't have any real culture. They don't have any real morals or values. They are, in fact, like a gilded object. They look good on the outside, but on the inside, they're morally rotten. This kind of description of 1877 and 1900 can really be well seen in politics, where a lot of politicians said all the right things in public, appeared to be good people, but behind closed doors were engaged in some really shady practices. Let's talk first about corruption in the city level. Many cities in the Gilded Age were ruled over by mayors or public officials who were not under careful control and were able to use their position or their power to get away with lining their own pockets with money. Many of these cities grew rapidly. As we've already mentioned, they're flooded with migrants, the cities are expanding, industries are growing, and cities growing rapidly are going to spend large amounts of money. New roads, new courthouses, new city buildings, new parks, new libraries or museums. And these large pots of money attract greedy and corrupt people. If there are $1 million in play available to be spent, these greedy, corrupt men would like to have a hand in that so they can pocket a little for themselves. What made this system work in the 19th century was something called patronage. The leaders in many of these cities essentially sold offices, political offices, to their supporters. Hey, bud, you've been loyal to me. You've been a supporter. I let you be in charge of public works. Just make sure you make it worth my while. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. These political offices went to people who were not acting in the public's best interest, Instead, they were trying to make money off of their political office, line their own pockets. And many times they were doing so without caring if they did a good job or not. Patronage is a system whereby you hire people based on their loyalty. Loyalty matters more than competence. And what's most important in patronage is that you support the leader And whatever the leader wants, you give that person what they want. Because you didn't get that job because you were able or smart or capable. You got it because you were loyal to the leader. In many of the cities, there were political leaders we call city bosses. These bosses controlled city politics, and very often the way they did it was to provide food and help to poorer people in exchange for those people supporting them in elections. So let's say I'm a city boss, and you vote for me and support me and do what I need you to do. Well, I'm going to make sure in the winter you get a little extra food, maybe a little extra coal to keep your home warm. Or maybe somebody in your family's sick, and so I send a doctor to help you out. All you got to do is vote for me. And maybe when I need it, maybe you go out and break the legs of some people who are opponents, Maybe they have a little accident. This sounded very like mafia-ish just a little bit. And sometimes it was. Many of the poor citizens in the streets engaged in street fighting. They very frequently stole elections. One of the most common tactics was to grow a beard, go vote, shave a little bit, like maybe you got, mutton chops and a little goatee left, shave again, then you just got a mustache, shave again, and then go vote some more. And we do find that happening in some places. Now you might think this sounds really terrible, and it is really terrible because it's corrupt. It allows one person to control the politics of a city in a way that is not fair and open to everybody. But it does provide a kind of crude welfare system for these poor people who otherwise might have not survived on their own. By attaching themselves to a powerful city boss, these poorer folks were able to survive and make enough for themselves to keep going. The worst of the city bosses was in charge of New York in the 1860s and early 1870s. His name is Boss Tweed. And we've got Tweed here in a cartoon. The cartoon is being drawn to show Tweed as in control of the ballot box. Boss Tweed says, as long as I count the votes, what are you going to do about it? Say. Meaning, Tweed doesn't lose elections because Tweed controls the outcome of the election. Another cartoon involving Tweed, showing Tweed up here watching as democracy and freedom and good, New Yorkers are mauled by the Tammany Tiger. Tweed belonged to a political organization that was nicknamed the Tammany Hall Tiger, and he used his power to enrich himself at the expense of New York folks, and people who got in his way got hurt. Here's another Tweed, showing Tweed as a vulture. And he and his supporters, his patronage cronies, are, picking New York clean of all of its money. This cartoon was called Let Us Pray. Do you see the play on words, like bird of prey instead of P-R-A-Y? And another Tweed cartoon. Who stole the money of the people of New York? Well, when Tweed got found out and exposed, everybody snitched on everybody else. But Tweed was the head of the ring. And Tweed, in fact, fled the United States, but he was recognized because people had seen his face in these cartoons that I've shown you. And so he got spotted and arrested and brought back to justice. But Tweed is not the only political boss. Many cities have them in the 19th century, and even New York after Tweed has a political boss who controls jobs, controls money, controls the patronage system. One of the reasons why this system worked the way it did is because America had a two-party system in which everyone saw himself as a member of that party and completely had to be loyal to that party. So they saw party competition not as just we do politics because we're trying to make good decisions, but my party has got to win. It's almost like having a favorite sports team. Republicans, who held up Lincoln as the example of the kind of person you should be, since he's a Republican. Republicans are mostly Easterners, businessmen, some farmers, not a whole lot of farmers. They tend to be very pro-business, so more likely to find a factory owner that's a Republican. These are people who are in favor of protective tariffs. And if you were on the Democrat side, which is Tweed, Democrat, you tended to see many of them as Southerners, immigrants, city bosses, often were Democrats. They tended to be more in favor of states' rights, a little bit more in line with farming and anti-tariff. And so at the end of the day, one of the reasons why the politics of this time period is so corrupt is that people see their membership in the party and their connection to the party to be more important than anything else. You got to support the party, even if the party is doing something corrupt or wrong. Party competition was very fierce. People showed up to elections in this time period in numbers that should make us, frankly, embarrassed. In 1876, 80% of the people who could vote voted. Today, it's about half. And that number declined, but still remained above 70% all the way to 1900. People got out and they voted. They took politics seriously because it was like, your team's got to win. You got to get out there and be involved. Tweed needs you. Otherwise, he's not going to win this next election. Voting was so predictable that you could pretty much say that if someone was a Democrat, they're from the South. The map shows the states where people voted Democratic 4 to 5 times in this time period, and they're mostly southern states. A few northern states. Connecticut has got some Democrat stuff going on. New Jersey. The yellow states typically tended to vote Republican. And swing states are green, so they kind of can go either direction in this time period. New York, where Tweed was heavily Democratic, but you would find a lot of business people there too, and business people tended to vote more Republican. Everybody belonged to a party. You got to stick with your team. You got to support your party. If you don't, you're a traitor, and we don't like you. This deep, deep commitment to political parties and to corruption and patronage actually got a president killed. So Lincoln's our first assassinated president. Our second is Garfield. Political jobs were also given out at the federal level on the basis of party loyalty. And President Andrew Jackson's the one who started that process. There were about 166,000 of these federal jobs. Most of them were post office jobs. So the idea is, if you are a loyal Democrat and the president's a Democrat, ask, for him to appoint you postmaster of your tiny little rinky-dink town. And say, look, I'm a good, loyal Democrat. I deserve this job. Many times these people got the job, even though they weren't even competent to run it. But they got it because they were loyal to the political party. And they were expected to kick back a little of their income to support the party. So the party essentially is kind of like selling positions in a way. Well, that's how the system worked. And a frustrated job seeker named Charles Guiteau didn't get a job, so he just shot the president. Now, he did have some mental difficulties and some problems with his thinking. If you study his life before he assassinated Garfield, it's pretty clear that he has got some kind of problems. Not sure if it's bipolar disorder or some kind of, little bit of schizophrenia. He definitely has delusions. And he stalked Garfield for months before he finally caught up with the president in 1881 and shot him. All because he didn't get the job. He didn't get the job that he thought he deserved. In response to this assassination of a president, the U.S. Congress passed the Pendleton Civil Service Act. This act created a system to actually make it possible that we would give jobs to people on their competence, not their party loyalty. So for the first time, there will be tests, and those tests are going to determine whether or not you get a federal job. Amazing idea, right? The idea that we'd actually test people to see if they're competent. So we don't care about your party loyalty. We just want to see if you can pass the test. Unfortunately, even though this is a step forward in reforming the patronage system, it included only one half of federal jobs by 1896, which meant the other half were still open to people who were loyal to the party. So I don't know, if you're a glass half full or a half empty person, however you see it, either you see it as good that we got halfway, or you see it as, well, it's sad that still half aren't included. Either way, this is the beginning of reforms to keep jobs in the hands of competent people and not reward them based on your love of your political party. There is Charles Guiteau demanding a job, an office, or your life. I think the cartoonist did a pretty good job, because this top picture, that is actually Guiteau right there. See? That's pretty good. And that is President Garfield below. So thanks to a frustrated job seeker, we lost our second president of the United States in a political system that was deeply corrupt. As Mark Twain said, though, on the outside it glittered like gold. On the inside it was rot.